Well, good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday, and welcome to day 2 of this week's devotions. And what I want to do over the next 4 days is I want to walk through Scripture and just take a look at 4 people who displayed great faith. I think in a season like this, a lot of times it's really encouraging just to dive into the Scripture and to see not only what it looks like to have great faith, but to see how God responds to that. And so I want to take the next 4 days and we're going to look at 4 different people who in a moment displayed incredible faith in God's plan, in his call, just in what he had for their life. And so I hope that you guys will find this fruitful. Today, I'm so excited because it is talking about probably the most impactful moment in all of Scripture, or one of the most impactful moments in all of Scripture, just personally in my life. And so as we do that, I want to lead up to the moment, because what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about Peter and then also Jesus, of course, but Peter walking on the water. And it's something that honestly led to my call or confirmed my call into ministry. And so I'll talk about that here in just a moment, but I want to give you some context about what's happening here. So prior to what we're going to read in Matthew chapter 14, verses 25 through 33, we see that King Herod has killed John the Baptist, actually beheaded him, brought his head literally onto a silver platter. Jesus hears what happened and he's going to grieve and he wants to mourn. And so he tries to withdraw to kind of this place of solitude because he just wants to spend some time and really process what just happened. As he tries to withdraw, people know that he's going there. People hear that he's going to this kind of isolated spot, and they follow him because he's Jesus. And that's what people did. They followed him wherever he went. And so they follow him. He begins healing the sick. He understands that despite he's hurting, despite the fact that he's grieving, that something terrible has happened, ministry must go on, which I think there's probably a sermon, an entire week of devotions right there. But he understands that ministry has to continue. And so he begins healing people, and then that's when we see him feed the 5,000, which in reality, that's 5,000 men. That's what Scripture says. So in reality, it's more likely that it was 10 to 15,000 people when you count women and children. And of course, that's when he took 5 loaves, 2 fish, added them together, carried the one, gets a remainder of 12 baskets. And that brings us to the moment in Matthew chapter 14 that we're going to talk about today. And so he does all of this, right? He feeds the 5 to 15,000 people, and then he gets done, and he still just needs a moment. And so he sends his men in the boat to go to the other side of the sea. He goes up on the mountainside, and that's where we land in verse 25. And so I just want to read it to you very quickly, and then we'll kind of get into it. So here's what it says in Matthew chapter 14, verses 25 through 33. It says, "And in the 4th watch of the night," which is 3 to 6 a.m., somewhere in there, he came to them, walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It's a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid. Beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand, took hold of him, saying to him, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. And those in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." I want you to notice that Jesus didn't give Peter any instructions other than simply come. Faith sometimes is simply taking the next right step. I mean, if you look at when he called these men to follow him, he simply said, "Follow me, follow me." And now we see him calling to Peter, and he just says, "Come." He doesn't say, "I want you to take your right foot, slowly step it onto the water, hold onto the side of the boat. Once you know your right foot is sure, then you can let go of the boat, start stepping forward. I'll reach my hand out and I'll make sure you don't sink." No, he just says, "Come." And he does. He responds. I think a lot of times in our life, especially in a season like this, as we begin to seek God's face and as we begin to really spend time in prayer and spend time in Scripture, and we start to recognize God's voice and we start to recognize his calling on us, we want to see the whole picture. We're afraid of what's going to happen if we don't know that we're going to be okay, that it's not, it's not all going to work out. And so it makes us kind of walk with trepidation and not really certain that God's going to be there if we were to fall. But sometimes he just wants us to step. Sometimes he just wants us to leave the comfort. I think a lot of times God will call us out of a position of comfort It's because he knows that that's a position that we can only trust him in. I think of where I was before I came on staff at NorthRoad. I was working for an organization called Righteous Ride. Some of you may know who they are, some of you may not, but they're a nonprofit ministry that they service missionaries who are in the States on furlough. And so I loved life at Righteous Rides. The people that worked there were like family to us. We went through infertility while I worked there. We went through pregnancy. We went through adoption. We went through major life change when I was at Righteous Rides. And so these people became family to us, and we were doing incredible things. I mean, daily we were praying with missionaries. We were seeing God's kingdom literally advance throughout the world as missionaries from countries all over the world were coming in and picking up vans and spending time and praying and doing these things. And I just felt like it was right where God wanted me until he placed a call in my life to join NorthRoad. I'll never forget how scared I was to come home and tell my wife that I felt like God was calling us to leave Righteous Rides. It was scary. I found myself in kind of a Peter moment, and this is what I was talking about when I said it really confirmed my call into ministry. Was I felt like I was Peter standing in the boat, and the boat to me represented really good things. Righteous Rides is an incredible thing where people are hearing about Jesus and the gospel is being advanced and missionaries are being encouraged and lifted up. And it was a really, really good thing, but it was also comfortable. And I knew that God was calling me to do something kind of scary, something I had never done before, something that I wasn't fully equipped to do, but I knew that he was calling me to step out of the boat. And for a season, I thought, okay, is there a way that I can make both work? Is there a way that I can step into this position at NorthRoad and continue doing what I'm doing at Righteous Rides? But God didn't call Peter to stand with one foot in the boat and one foot in the water. He simply said, come. And I knew in that moment, that's what he was calling me to do, was to step out of the boat. You know, one of my favorite songs, one of my absolute favorite songs is Oceans by Hillsong. A lot of you probably know it. Some of you may not, and that's okay. But there's a portion in the song, which I have a tattoo of it. And it says this, it says, Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. And that line, trust without borders, hits so hard for me. I want to wake up every single day and trust that God is going to take me to a spot where I have absolutely no borders to the trust that I place in him. I want him to take me to water so deep that I have to trust him to keep me above water. I want him to call me to places that are scary. I want him to give me dreams that are bigger than anything I could ever dream up. I want him to call me onto the water, and I want to respond. You know, a lot of times we look at this story of Peter walking on the water, and we find ourselves getting hung up on the fact that he sank, right? And we talk about how, man, he took his eyes off of Jesus and he sank. He got consumed with the storms. He got consumed with the waves. And in this season of life, man, how many of us are just simply being consumed by the waves and the storms? We find ourselves in this season, and we know that God is who he says he is. We know that God can provide. We know that God can save us, but we're just consumed with the fear of what's going to happen if the waves come crashing over. Yeah, Peter sank. He did. But there were 11 other men in the boat watching him walk on water. There were 11 other men who had to watch Peter have this incredibly intimate moment with Jesus that none of them ever would. There were 11 other men who saw Peter fail, but fail forward. He failed, and he was closer to Jesus than he was when he was in the boat. And the other 11 found themselves in comfort. And it's interesting, I think, that their fear was so quickly replaced with worship. What if in this season of life, like Peter, when God calls us, we simply step out of the boat? What if in this season, when the waves and the storms come crashing around us, we trust that God is who he says he is, and that if he has called us onto the waters, that our trust can be so far beyond borders that we know no matter what happens, even if we sink, we're going to sink closer to him. What if in this season, our fear and our anxiety was replaced with worship? I want to take you back to what it said in verse 32. And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, He stopped the storms. He stopped the waves. And those in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Even in the midst of everything that they had just seen, let's not forget that Jesus had just performed a miracle and fed probably 15,000 people from 5 loaves and 2 fish. And in the moment that he was walking on water, the men in the boat doubted that it was him. But the moment they realized it was him, their fear and their anxiety turned to worship. Let's trust him so much that we're willing to walk out of the boat. Let's trust him so much that our fear and our anxiety is replaced with worship. Church, imagine how different things would look in this season of life if we simply trusted him without borders. I want to encourage you guys in this. I want to challenge you in this. Whether you're watching this to start your day, or maybe you're watching it at the end of the day and it's just kind of your recap, it's your moment to kind of settle down from all of the craziness, I want you to take a moment and just pray. I want you to pray that he would allow his Spirit to lead you where your trust is without borders. Pray that he would put you into really uncomfortable positions for him. Don't settle for the comfort of the boat. Seek intimacy with him. Run after him with everything you have, and know that if you will take the next right step, if you will have faith that he is who he says he is, even if you begin to sink, even if for a moment you have a lapse in your vision and you start to focus on the waves and the storms, you will feel closer to him. Go today with great intentionality. Go today trusting him with all that you have. Go to him ready to walk on water. Have a great day.